Hey, what's up? This is Scott with Level Up Tutorials, and in this video I'm going to be showing you 4 great techniques for reducing the image size on your website. Now, reducing the image size is super important because the smaller your images are, the less time they take to load, therefore the faster your site loads, and therefore the less people run away from your slow site. So let's check it out right now. So as we continue along in this series, there may be a lot of these techniques you've heard of, and maybe there's some that you haven't heard of. So if you have already heard of this and you know exactly what you're doing, feel free to skip the video or stick around for any sort of extra information you might want to learn. But we're essentially going to go through a whole bunch of different techniques you can do to optimize different performance areas of your website now. And the main thing is that every website is really different. So it's going to be hard to recommend a universal technique for every website, but we're going to be stressing more of the overall big picture techniques here. And the first one of these techniques is reducing image size. Now, as you may or may not know, images are a large part of your website in terms of file size. And that file size, all of those files have to get downloaded. So the slower the internet connection, the slower those downloads are going to be. Now, images aren't as big of a deal now as they were before, because back in the day you used to have an image for every single button or things like that because you couldn't do some of the stuff with CSS. However, it's still very important to optimize your images. So the first suggestion I would have would be to use some sort of image optimization process. Now, if you don't have a build process, like you're not using Gulp or Grunt, you can always use this free option, Image Optim. Now, this application's pretty cool. If you have your website and let's say you have a folder full of images like I do here on my desktop, you can essentially just drag your entire folder in here, and it's going to go through and it's going to remove all the extraneous data from these images. Now, Image Optim is really super fast. As you just saw, it just flew through this stuff. And as you can see, it actually gave me a savings of around, around 12% overall, but I get like 13, 17. And if you wanted to run all of these through once again, you could certainly do that, and it may find some additional savings. It doesn't look like it did that for me though. So now you can see in a couple of seconds, we just shaved off some kilobytes of these images. And while it may not seem like much, in this regard, every little bit counts, and this step is just really too easy to ignore. Now you might be wondering, well, I don't want to download an application and drag my images into it. That's fine. I mean, this is really easy, but you can always build in a process into your build process. Using something like gulp-image min, you can add different image minifiers. You can see compressing JPEGs, compressing PNGs, compressing SVGs, and this is just going to remove all the data that's not going to affect the way it looks. So keep in mind, these compressions, they're not compressing the file visually. You're not going to notice. It's going to remove things like metadata that you really just don't need and don't even want on your images that are being loaded online. So something like gulp-image min and throwing this into your build process, if you're using Gulp, is really quick and easy. You can do it once, forget about it. You can do it once and then reuse it on every single project you ever use. But either way, compressing your images in this way is a really, really nice thing to do. Now, what's another way that we can actually make our images more performant? Well, it's become less of a thing now that you can use icon fonts and things like that, but CSS sprites are still relevant despite not being as important as before. Now, you can use a tool like this Sprite Gen, tools like this that allow you to add images to this canvas. You can see they all exist here, the ones that are in here, and basically it's stitching them together in one large image. And then in this technique, you'd be selecting your image. You can see in this sprite generator, it gives you the actual position coordinates. So then you would be defining your images in your CSS using a background image. So you would set the dimensions correctly. You would set the background image to be that of this sprite containing all of these images. And then you would use the background position to only show the correct image. So CSS sprites is a topic you can find written about a ton online. It's a technique that's been used for a very long time. There's sites like this. There's sites like Sprite Cow, which are nice, that allow you to upload your sprite and get that CSS data so you just don't have to deal with finding out the perfect coordinates for your background position. But nonetheless, CSS sprites are certainly a technique that can take 6 small images, take it into one image that's a little bit larger, but only is required to download once instead of 6 separate times. Okay, so now it's one other main thing that you can do to reduce the image size and image load on your website. Well, other than just using less images, you can use things like an icon font instead of using image icons. So there are tons of icon fonts. The most popular seems to be Font Awesome. Now, Font Awesome has a ton of icons, and although the icon font does take a bit to download, if you're using a lot of icons, right, having an icon font like this is going to be more performative than loading this many images. However, if you're only using a couple of icons, this whole pack might not be worth it. That doesn't mean icon fonts aren't useful. You can actually use a service like IcoMoon to build your own icon font package. Now you can do it from all sorts of other icon fonts, but what this does is essentially allows you to build an icon font yourself that only includes the exact icons you need. This makes it so you don't need to download the entire collection of the font, and the font size is reduced dramatically. Now, the last technique I'm going to show you to reduce your image file size is to use something like picture fill. Now, picture fill is a responsive image polyfill for the picture, src set, sizes, and more. It basically allows you to define several different images for different widths. So it's essentially breakpoints for your images. And because of that, you can then only serve the correct size image. Let's say you have a large image and you want that image to be large on your desktop, but you also want that image to show up on mobile correctly. You can actually make a copy, resize, or even have your server make a copy and resize this image, and then load up an entirely different image based on the browser width. This way, if your users are browsing on their mobile phones, they're not going to have to download that giant desktop image, but they can still get the correct image. So using something like picture fill is a great way to reduce the size for those users on mobile. Cool, so I hope these 4 techniques for reducing your image size and your image load on your website become very helpful and just become regular parts of your development workflow. I would love to show each of these techniques in all sorts of different platforms, but unfortunately there's just really too many different ones to cover, so it's up to you to seek out options for whatever platform you're using. Drupal or WordPress or Angular or Meteor or any sort of system, even if it's just plain HTML that you're using, all of these things are going to help. So as always, this is Scott with Level Up Tutorials. If you have any questions or comments, leave a comment in the video or hit me up at Twitter or Facebook at Level Up Tutorials. I love to hear from you. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.